This regular meeting of the Board of Education for September 4th, 2018 is called to order. Welcome to everybody present and to our television viewers. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV Services website. We have interpreters with us this evening, and I'd like to ask them to come forward at this time, introduce themselves in the language they'll be interpreting, and inform the audience where they'll be located in the auditorium should someone need their assistance. Please use the standing mic.
Меня зовут Жанна, я переводчик с русского и на русский язык. Если кому-то нужен мой сервис, я сегодня здесь для вас. Спасибо.
Tôi tên là Hằng, tôi là thông dịch Việt Nam. Nếu mà ai cần tiếng Việt, tôi ở đằng sau. Nếu mà ai muốn giúp, xin cảm ơn.
Hola y muy buenas tardes. Me llamo Daniel y voy a estar ofreciendo servicios de interpretación en español. Acá al fondo. Gracias.
我姓马，我是中文翻译。假如你需要，可以幫忙你。我姓馬嘅，我可以同你翻譯嘅廣東話，如果需要嘅話。
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Ballot Abdi. I'm here for Somali, those who need an interpreter. So I speak Somali. Magayga waa Ballot Adan Abdi. Halkan waxaa ujeedana turjumaana waalidiinta ama Soomaalida kusoo qayb gali doonta caawa shirka halkan lagu sii qabanayo.
Thank you. An overview of the business the board will be conducting tonight. We'll begin with student and public comment, followed by the superintendent's report, then a consideration of a Step 3 complaint. We will discuss the board's positions on November ballot measures and consider our business agenda. Board members, are there any items in our business agenda that you have questions on? This does not include any individual action items listed on tonight's agenda.
So, Ms. Chair Moore, I've got, there's one contract that I have an outstanding request from staff for a report and potential language changes, and so I've already flagged it for staff, and we'll see when we get to the business agenda whether we're ready to go or not.
Okay. Any other items? Okay. So we will discuss that item during the business agenda portion of the evening. Okay, so we'll move right into student and public comment. Ms. Houston, do we have any?
No student comment, but 6 for public comment. And our first 2 speakers are Teresa Greer and Ophelia Lara.
And as folks make their way to the table, I'd like to review guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments to the board. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen with our electronic devices turned off. Board members and superintendent will not respond to comments or questions during public comment, but the board office will follow up on board-related issues raised during public testimony. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration for others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you give them to Ms. Hewson to distribute to the board and superintendent. Presenters will have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of your testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on, and when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time to allow other commenters to come. We appreciate your input and thank you for your cooperation. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Paulson Greer, Greer. My daughter is a very, very nervous kindergartner this year, not unsurprising, at Sabin Elementary School. And can all the Sabin parents please raise your hands? Thank you. So I'm going to give you a little familial context. My grandparents met and fell in love at the halls of Grant High School and graduated in 1939. My parents are both graduates of the Portland Public School System, Grant and Cleveland, proud graduates in 1965. And my mom is a 20-year veteran of Portland Public Schools teacher. She started her career at Woodlawn Elementary School as a kindergarten teacher. My brother and I are both graduates of Grant High School, and my children will be fourth-generation graduates of Portland Public School. And I say that because I am incredibly proud that my academic career started at Portland Public Schools, and I believe it served me, my parents, my grandparents, my aunties and uncles very, very well. In 1982, I was a kindergartner in room 113 at Sabin Elementary School, and boy, did poor Mrs. Barnett have her hands full with 18 kids. Fast forward to just this morning in 2018, and my daughter also sat in that same exact room, room 113, at Sabin Elementary School. Also just as nervous as I was 36 years ago. But a glaring difference is that her poor teacher has 29 students enrolled with a projected 30 with a transfer in 2 weeks. The children don't have enough room to sit on the carpet to listen to their teacher read a book. Now, a lot has changed since 1982 when I was a kindergartner. We all know more about education and how to foster optimal educational outcomes for children. There have been numerous studies and brilliant minds like yourselves that have concluded that lower class size is directly related to optimal educational outcomes, especially for grades K through 3. I understand the administration's staffing thresholds and the teacher contract differ, and I'm not here to discuss minutia, but what I do know, what we all know, is lower class size makes a difference. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You all care about the welfare of children, or you wouldn't be here volunteering your careers and 4 years of your lives. But unlike me, you have the power to make this change, not just for Sabin, but for all the kindergartners who have overcrowding in their schools. Let's give them the best start to their educational career in Portland Public Schools so my kids and all the other kids can say that they too are proud to be part of the Portland Public School system. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ophelia Lara, L-A-R-A. Estoy aquí representando a la comunidad de Bridger, que es una comunidad donde hay mucha diversidad. Familias de diferentes nacionalidades, diferentes culturas, pero todos con una sola petición. Queremos una solución inmediata al gran problema que estamos enfrentando, que es la instalación de las aulas portátiles que se habían prometido desde hace mucho tiempo atrás y que desafortunadamente no se realizó antes que nuestros hijos comenzaran la escuela. Yo, como todos los demás padres, estamos muy preocupados por este gran problema que está afectando negativamente la educación de nuestros hijos. Queremos ver estas aulas portables instaladas y funcionando para la primera semana de octubre. Y también necesitamos que la Junta Directiva nos incluya para hacer el plan para abordar las cuestiones del espacio del próximo año para nuestra escuela de Bridger. Debemos comenzar este proceso de planificación ahora mismo, sin más tardanzas. El problema del retraso de las aulas portables es un problema grave que está creando un efecto negativo en la educación de nuestros hijos. A mi hijo, que está en 5º grado, le tocó estar en una de las aulas que están colocadas en el gimnasio de la escuela como su aula principal para comenzar este año escolar. No hay un divisor real para las aulas, solo una tela delgada. Y no solo estas dos clases han sido afectadas por este gran problema, sino el resto de los niños de la escuela que se ven obligados a tener educación física a la intemperie, expuestos a la lluvia y al sol. Yo pienso que un día de retraso en el aprendizaje de los estudiantes puede afectar mucho negativamente en su educación. Si un día afecta mucho, ahora imaginémonos a 2 meses o más. El ambiente no es un ambiente propicio donde mi hijo y sus compañeros de clases y todos los demás niños que han sido afectados para su aprendizaje, es imposible que nuestros hijos puedan concentrarse. Los niveles de ruido son muy altos. Después de solo una semana de escuela, yo le pregunté a mi hijo y la respuesta, y yo ya la sabía, y también los otros padres de Bridger. Él me confirmó que en realidad es muy difícil concentrarse y muchas veces ni siquiera escucha lo que el maestro le dice. Necesitamos las aulas portables instaladas para la primera semana de octubre. También necesitamos ser parte del proceso para abordar el futuro de Bridger en términos de espacios y programación. Necesitamos que haya más claridad cuál es el plan y que haya una transparencia de este proceso y que el proceso comience ahora. Sería muy desastroso para la educación de nuestros hijos que se repitiera el mismo escenario el siguiente año. Necesitamos pedirles de favor que consideren este problema y que haya una solución inmediata. Muchas gracias.
Good evening. I'm here tonight representing the community of Bridger, which is a community where there is much diversity, families from different nationalities, different cultures, but with all one request. We want an immediate solution to the great problem we have facing us, the installation of portable classrooms that had been promised to us as of a while ago and unfortunately has not been realized before our children had started school. I, like many of the other parents, are all worried and concerned about the grand problem that this could be presenting to negatively affect the education of our children. We would like these portable classrooms installed and functioning for the first week of October. Also, we need that the school board includes us in order to make a plan that can take on all of the questions with regards to space for the next year at our School of Bridger. We need to start this process of planning now, without any more delays. The problem of delays in the portable classrooms is a grave problem that is creating a negative effect on the education of our children. My child, who is in the 5th grade, is one of the children who has been inside 2 classrooms that have been placed inside the gymnasium of the school as their principal classroom in order to start this new school year. There is no true divider between the classrooms, only a thin curtain of material. I am not alone, it's not only these 2 classrooms that have been affected by this great problem, as well as the rest of the students in the school who find themselves obliged to have education, physical education, exposed to the rain and to the sun. I think that another day of delay with regards to the learning of the students could affect very negatively in their education. One more day could affect very much now. Imagine how much 2 or more months could as well. The environment is not an environment that is adequate for my child, nor for his classmates, nor any of the other children who have been affected for their learning. It is impossible that our children can concentrate with the levels of noise as loud as they are. After only a week back at school, I asked my son, and his response that he gave me is one that we, all of the parents, know well. My child confirmed to me that it was not possible to concentrate due to the noise, as well as the fact that it was difficult to hear the voice of the teacher as a result of all that noise. We need these portable classrooms installed by the first week of October. We also need to be a part of the process that will bring forward the future of Bridger and continue to end the spaces and the need for programmation. We need more clarity with regards to this plan, and we need that transparency. This is the process, and the process needs to start now.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joseph Clyde and Elizabeth Israel Davis.
Joseph Clyde, C-L-Y-D-E. Hey, everybody. So it's my understanding your SPED drivers have been speaking to you for about a year in public comment. They have been hoping to effectively communicate the issues for safely driving their students to and from the schools. And they have given you miles driven and the number of children as a large figure. They have told you the cost of living in the Portland, and the fact there is a national driver shortage. And invited you to ride along with them to observe the important work they do. Well, the superintendent did something last Thursday, a start, but not with the SPED drivers, a GT bus from First Student, Route 201, picking up kinders and taking them to Ainsworth. That's a good thing, but that can be a start, but there should be more rides along and on SPED buses. And if the SPED drivers were allowed to pick what routes to drive, you could probably get a better perspective. So here's the challenge. I determined over the last 30 years that a challenge is better than a problem. So the challenge is for you guys to find some time to ride along on SPED routes, arrange rides along on your district SPED routes, and if you have time, maybe let the drivers pick the routes, and if you have time, maybe on a couple of GT routes. Because, you know, the challenging, this is about the kids. We don't want you to bring cameras. We don't want you to bring the press. Maybe they could meet you outside of the bus. But, you know, it puts everything in a different light if you bring, you know, the press. So, compared to the superintendent's wages, which is about, my figure is about $5,673 a month, or $140 an hour. You know, whatever you gave the SPED drivers in this last contract, which is going to expire in 9 months. If you take the time and you drive with them and you ride with those drivers, you'll quite possibly get a better perspective, and you'll be able to form some kind of partnership instead of this divisive thing. So that's essentially what it is. It's a challenge for you guys to arrange to drive with the SPED drivers. Let the SPED drivers in your district choose the routes. Ride along with them. You got about 9 months before the contract expires. And, you know, maybe some GT routes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, board members and Superintendent Guerrero. My name is Elizabeth Israel Davis, ISR-AEL-DAVIS. I am a PPS reading specialist and have taught in our district for 11 years. I am one of the members speaking here tonight representing the PPS Dyslexia Advocacy Group, which is made up of parents, educators, and dyslexia awareness advocates in our community. I first have some reasons why we're here, and then we have some requests. We are here because 1 in every 5 people is affected by dyslexia. Students with dyslexia are in nearly every PPS classroom, but effective reading instruction is not. Currently in PPS, too many students who struggle with the decoding aspects of reading go unidentified as dyslexic, or are identified late for a variety of reasons. Of those identified, only those whose families can access and afford private tutoring receive the instruction they need to learn to read independently. In very rare cases, these students' needs are met in a free and appropriate manner in PPS schools, but there is no standardized access across the district to reading instruction and other services that these students need. Many of those who do not receive the services they need drop out and do not graduate from high school, or they receive a modified high school diploma. Fortunately, it is not that hard to teach reading decoding skills to students with dyslexia, especially when they are identified early and when a structured literacy approach is used. The structured literacy methods benefit all students. PPS currently has adopted Project READ, which is a curriculum that provides this structured, explicit, sequential, and kinesthetic approach to teaching reading decoding skills. but it is being considered a Tier 2, Tier 3 intervention, and not all primary teachers have been trained to use it, and some must share one kit for a whole building. Additionally, not all special ed teachers have been trained to use it. So now I get to our first request. On August 29th, 2018, PPS employees received an email from Stephanie Soden, Chief of Staff, with the subject line, Reimagining PPS Together, and an update on our visioning work. This email stated that Ms. Soden, along with team lead Jonathan Garcia, were responsible for engaging every district stakeholder group so that the final vision document would reflect the hopes and dreams of the whole community. We, the PPS Dyslexia Advocacy Group, are a district stakeholder group. We strongly request a place at the table, at this particular table, of the Reimagining PPS Together visioning work. Thank you for your consideration, and Marty Stockton is up next to present our additional requests.
Thank you.
So next we have Marty Stockton and Lisa Lyon.
Good evening, Chair, board members, and Superintendent Guerrero. My name is Marty Stockton, Stockton. I am the parent of a Beaumont Middle School 7th grader with dyslexia. Tonight I speak on behalf of the PPS Dyslexia Advocacy Group. On May 29th of this year, our group met with Brenda Fox, Interim Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. The purpose of that meeting was to cover our short and long-term requests and goals, which I deliver to you tonight, along with our public requests. Request number 1, we ask the Portland Public Schools to review our short and long-term requests and goals document before you tonight and partner with us in addressing dyslexia support. PPS Board of Education, district staff, parents and students, educators and advocates need to partner together to leverage our knowledge and lived experience with dyslexia. We can't do it alone. Attached to this public comment is the full PPS Dyslexia Advocacy Group's short and long-term requests and goals, from which I would like to pull a few items to highlight briefly. So I'm going to list a few short-term requests and goals. Number 1, we would like to declare October as Dyslexia Awareness Month as an annual action of the PPS Board of Education and not on a year-to-year basis when we bring it up. This is something that needs to be on your calendar, is something that you do every year. We would like there to be, by winter of 2019, a parent notification template for the dyslexia at-risk screening results, which are now required this year by the state legislation. We would like an improved and a maintained PPS dyslexia webpage with families as the primary audience. We would like clarification that the structured literacy curriculum, whether it's Project Read and or in an International Dyslexia Association supported method, that will be used for Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention, and ideally we want it in the classroom as Tier 1. Teacher training, Project Read. We want all kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers, reading specialists, and Learning Centers teachers to be trained in Project Read. We want additional kits purchased for grade level per building. Some of our long-term requests and goals. We would like to be officially recognized as an advisory group that has PPS staff support. Additionally, we would like the PPS Central Office to develop a dyslexia support plan for students with dyslexia from kindergarten through high school. Fairfax County, Virginia has probably one of the best dyslexia handbooks. I encourage you to look at it. On the second sheet, I've included the link. Please consider. Just additionally, we would like to meet with PPS leadership, and we ask that the PPS Board of Education champion these dyslexia support efforts. Thanks for your consideration. We welcome a shared path forward.
Thank you.
So, just a point of inquiry. Did you leave
Materials over there, or you were referencing some materials?
I believe the materials were printed out and handed before you.
Are they?
Yeah.
In our packet?
So it's just a
don't know.
2-page.
Okay, I'll find it.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Before I begin, could I just acknowledge the people that are here in support of this testimony? Dyslexia people. Great, thank you. Chair Moore, members of the board, and Superintendent Guerrero. My name is Lisa Lyon, Lyon. I come to testify tonight as a PPS parent, a member of the PPS advocacy group, and a founding member of Decoding Dyslexia Oregon. As with any issue, there is good news and bad news. I will start with the good news. Fortunately, much progress has been made since I first spoke before this board 4 years ago. With the passage of 4 legislative bills, dyslexia is beginning to be understood and discussed. Bill 2412 mandated that one educator per K-5 building receive 30 hours of professional development in dyslexia. I applaud PPS for choosing to train double the number of educators as was required by law. To date, PPS teachers have received nearly 4,000 hours of professional development on dyslexia and literacy practices. While this is definite progress, it is not sufficient and more must be done. This is the tip of the iceberg. As far as the bad news, it has come to our attention that 10 of the 58 PPS elementary schools are not in compliance with state requirements. For 6 of the schools, it is due to the incomplete documentation of teacher training and/or confirmation of which staff completed the required training. The remaining 4 schools have no assigned teachers in the dyslexia advisor role, nor any staff who have completed the training. In addition, we have also learned that many district reading specialists are part-time employees and that the dyslexia PD was only offered to full-time staff. While we understand that funds must be strategically spent, we want to ask, does it make sense to have the educators who are most likely to serve these students denied that specialized training? As a Decoding Dyslexia board member, I routinely provide resources and referrals to families who want to make sure their children learn to read. It sounds simple enough, but it is not. It is heartbreaking. I frequently dialogue with parents about their frustrations of trying to get up evaluations from district psychologists and those trying to get appropriate evidence-based instruction for their children. Oftentimes, after parents reveal which school their child attends, I recommend private tutoring, but many cannot afford this luxury. For a district which frequently talks about equity as a guiding factor, this inequity is blatant and unacceptable. Children of means get the help they need privately, while economically challenged students do not. The inability of these schools to serve their students is not the fault of PPS teachers. The blame continues to fall squarely on the shoulders of Oregon's educator prep programs, which have refused to modify their coursework to include training on dyslexia, despite what everyone knows to be true. To change the output, you must change the input. As long as districts like PPS continue to hire teachers who have not received strong foundational skills in reading, the burden will remain on districts to perpetually retrain educators after they are hired, and that is a costly proposition. In closing, we would like to make the following request: that PPS, as the state's largest school district, use its statewide leadership role and responsibility to advocate that in-state university ed programs better prepare teachers by including dyslexia and structured literacy coursework, which would benefit all learners. PPS can be a leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for your comments. And if anybody has any materials to give to the board, please contact Roseanne Powell, the board manager. Before we move on to the superintendent's report, I just want to make note that Director Esparza Brown is out of state dealing with a family medical emergency. And she will probably return in about 2 weeks. So, Superintendent Guerrero.
Good evening, directors and families and audience members. Just a week ago, I was sharing with the board how our first day of school went, which was full of excitement. It's nice to report that our first week of classes we had a great start, I think. But I also want to acknowledge that while I want to thank our students, families, educators, and support staff, principals, everyone who had a hand in making sure we opened school as prepared as possible, that we still have some remaining items to iron out and resolve. And I just want to assure both those school communities that are here tonight and others that are still on our punch list that our work's incomplete. Please know that we're actively working in some of these areas. And so just to name a few, we're continuing to actively monitor enrollment numbers, for instance. We do have some class size goals, which is an important area for us to maintain, and schools like Bridger that I know that we're taking a close look at. And I think we all share the goal of making sure that our students learn in the best possible learning environment. And so it's not acceptable that all of our students don't have a classroom yet prepared for their learning. And so and we do have some unexpected factors that we should commit, and you should expect to see us to very transparently review with you so that you can see what the timelines are and what the real variables are that I know we just spent the whole morning talking about some of these issues, and we want to share what that conversation is. So please stay tuned for one of us to contact the school community to work on that. So it is a little bittersweet to say, hey, we had a great first week, because I know not all of our students and school communities are still there, but please know that we are very much have that at the top of our work right now to think about. For our other students, and I want this to be true for all of them, and I think there was a lot of exciting moments this past these first 5 days of the school year 6 now, both from students, from families in the schoolyard, from our teachers that we had an opportunity to visit all around the district. And I'm excited, not just because it's the start of another school year, which is always a great time, but also because we have, I believe, a dynamic new leadership team who were out there in the schools every day last week and again today, taking note of many of these same issues so we can actually have some informed conversations. And I think we're excited because we know that there are challenges that we have to embark on. I think we have the caliber of folks who are not going to be shy about really starting to go deep in things like, what does effective reading instruction need to include? How do we scale out screening and proper addressing of dyslexic needs? How do we design a plan that really gets at the heart of what our historically underserved students have been facing? So I'm excited that we're really going to start to dive into those topics, and we're going to need your partnership in doing that effectively. So we're committing to engaging our different stakeholders in each of those conversations. I've already heard some great suggestions tonight that we should really be working towards. So stay tuned for the way we approach things, perhaps to look a little differently than they've looked in the past, but we're excited about keeping the momentum going. So another small way that we plan to continue this practice of keeping those system leaders in touch with the work in our schools is by spending time in them. And sometimes that means not just the people that are already supporting our schools on a daily basis, but maybe those that haven't often gotten a chance to get out there. So as an example, we're excited, a small example, we're excited to kick off a Shadow a Student in September activity. This is going to give what we hope an opportunity for many central office staff, for instance, to see the school day through the eyes of a student and perhaps hear directly from our young adults and students what their day is like, so that we can better realize our through line and how we can direct our support more directly towards making their experience a positive one. So that'll be just another small example in the way over the next few weeks you can expect to see leadership out there. And speaking of continuing the momentum, we had, I think, by all accounts with the feedback, a pretty positive 3-day leadership institute for our school leaders last month. And we're already developing out our syllabus for the school year, and we have another next installment for our principles of learning and leading together coming up in the next couple of weeks. So our principals we're going to continue investing in their leadership development so they can be the strongest instructional leaders that they can be as well. They're going to play a critical role in realizing and developing a vision for us forward that is student-centered, that is data-informed, and it's all about raising the capacity of the organization. So we're going to, part of our agenda coming up next is how do we organize ourselves to engage in this kind of improvement? What do those conversations need to look like around core curriculum and multi-tiered systems and support? How do we make sure all of our students have the conditions, our teachers have the conditions in place for students to thrive? Another way that I know our families will get out there besides on the first days of school is our traditional back-to-school nights. So stay tuned for calendars from all of our school communities where we invite our families to come in and start to get a feel for how the routines have begun to get established in our different school communities. I know that a lot of our elementary schools are planning some pretty big celebrations, and we look forward to being there in many of those events. So this past Thursday was the start for one group of our students. It was the first day of kindergarten. Always an exciting day, not just because it's the first day of kindergarten, because it actually represents the beginning of their educational journey. Thursday, I did have the opportunity to spend time with our new chief of schools, Dr. Craig Cuellar, which we did kick off by riding a school bus, and I am going to take up your challenge, just letting you know, who are experiencing their first day in the Portland Public Schools. It's fun to talk to a lot of the families at the bus stop. And yes, we did deliver them, and I noticed that the parents raced over to be there at the school and make sure that they got there, and they did. But it was a really enjoyable experience for Craig and myself. And we spent the rest of the morning actually visiting a lot of kindergarten classrooms and schools throughout the district. That was a real high point for us as a district leadership team to be out there supporting our schools. And so maybe not everybody had a chance to experience kindergarten's first day, so we prepared a little video clip for you tonight. This is the first day of kindergarten here in Portland, and so we're excited to be out here at the bus stop. It's the beginning of the educational journey for our youngest students today.
We're really, really excited about seeing the wonderful smiles on the first day of kindergarten. It's going to be a fantastic year for all of our schools and all of our kids.
We're on the bus. We're on the school bus and we're heading to Ainsworth. We're going to Ainsworth. We're on a bus riding with friends to school. This is Devin and this is Brandon. These are my friends.
This is extremely important for students that we create these type of moments to be very joyful and filled with a lot of excitement to have a great first start for the whole entire school year.
We're in the bus and we're going to Ainsworth Elementary.
Why are we going to Ainsworth?
Because we're just going to go to school and learn.
It's his first day, everybody. Yay, can we clap for him? Right, first day.
The weather today is 75 degrees. It's partly cloudy.
You know, I consider myself a good driver, but after seeing the skills of our professional bus drivers, I know that I'm definitely far from great. The role that our bus drivers play are so extremely important, not only ensuring the safety of our children to and from school every day, but also guaranteeing that their first experience coming on the bus is a happy experience, which sets the course for the rest of their day.
In the beginning, it was, kind of stressful, but now I've got the hang of it, yeah. I didn't even hear the noise. It's easy now. I find it easy now. I just love working with kids. You can be kind of blue, and you go to work, and you see their little faces, and they got no cares, and it just makes you happy. And they'll give you a hug or whatever, just makes your day.
I just give so much kudos and just so much respect to the hard work that our bus drivers do on a daily basis for kids.
Yeah, because music's one of my favorite classes.
Oh, yeah, you're in it.
Today is the first day of kindergarten. Oh, it went awesome. It's definitely very family oriented, and we want to make sure that all families are supported. They're often as nervous as their own kids are. Sometimes they're also crying and they're excited and nervous as well. Just getting to know the families, building relationships, and getting to know the kids, that's the most important thing here.
¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás?
It just makes all the difference in the world when we have a positive, strong community.
Absolutely nothing better to experience than ride the bus with our wonderful kids.
Bien, gracias. Muy bien, gracias. Y usted, y usted.
Welcome to all of our kindergarten families and students to your time here in the Portland Public Schools. And just want to underline, we couldn't do this unless our students were delivered safely every day by our dedicated bus drivers, all of our bus drivers. And so you'll see me unplugged on a couple of your routes. So that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. The next agenda item is a consideration of a Step 3 complaint number 2018-04. The board has one appeal to consider tonight. Since the complaint involves a student, we're prohibited from discussing the details or substance of the complaint in public. When we're asked to decide complaints that involve individual students, we are constrained by federal law known as FERPA about what we can say in a public meeting without violating the student's right to privacy of their educational record. We take that obligation seriously and also take the obligation seriously to consider any complaint that comes before us. Under the complaint policy 4.50.030P, if the complainant is not satisfied with the final decision of the superintendent or his designee, the complainant may request an appeal in writing to the Board of Education. Board members received the reports and supporting materials related to this complaint that were produced during the 2 investigatory processes and have heard directly from the complainant in an executive session immediately prior to this board meeting. The board will now consider resolution number 5717, resolution to uphold the superintendent's decision on a Step 2 appeal, complaint number 2018-04. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Director Rosen moves and Director Anthony seconds the motion to adopt resolution 5717. Is there any additional board discussion on this resolution? Okay. The board will now vote on resolution 5717. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, we have 4 to 1. The resolution is approved by a vote of 4 to 1. Okay. The next agenda item is a discussion of ballot measures. The board met in a work session on August 14th, 2018 to receive status updates on our legislative agenda and relationships with local government system partners, and to discuss whether we wanted to take a position on ballot measures appearing on the November ballot. As elected officials, school board members retain the right to express individual political opinions, and the school board, unlike the district, is permitted to take positions on ballot items. It is highly unlikely that the board as a whole would ever weigh in on individual candidates, but state and local issues, for example, ballot measures or legislation, may often have immediate or potential impact on our educational mission. During our discussions at the work session, we established the following criteria for determining the circumstances under which the school board as a whole might consider expressing a collective opinion. 1, the issue has direct or indirect implications for the work of the board as the governing body of a school district. For example, policy changes, tax measures that may have a fiscal impact, etc. 2, having the PPS school board take a public position on an issue would likely have some impact on the debate or the outcome. And 3, there's a clear majority of support for a particular position among board members. The November ballot includes 8 measures that are before the voters. At our August 14th work session, we decided to take positions on 5 of the ballot measures. The remaining 3 were determined to be beyond the scope of authority for us to consider as a school board. Tonight, we're going to take an official vote on whether or not to take a position, and if so, supporting or opposing. The 5 ballot measures can be grouped into three categories. 2 measures are related to housing, 1 a state measure, 1 local. Director Anthony will present those measures and lead the discussion. A second category is 2 measures related to changes in tax policies. Director Bailey will present and facilitate that discussion. And 1 measure is related to overturning the state's anti-racial profiling statute. Director Brim Edwards will lead that discussion. We'll discuss the ballot measures separately and take a vote on each one individually. But before we start that, I understand we have some public comment.
Yes, we have 3. Our first 2 speakers are Lily Dorn and Sahan McLeavy.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name is Lily Dorn. I am the Regional Coalition Manager for the Yes for Affordable Housing campaign, the campaign that's working to pass 2 measures. As you touched on, Chair Moore, we are working to pass an affordable housing bond measure, Measure 26-199, and Measure 102, the statewide constitutional amendment for affordable housing. Beginning with the regional bond, there is no neighborhood in our region where the average full-time wage-earning renter, a person making $21.75 an hour, can afford a modest 2-bedroom rental home. It's absolutely impossible to miss the daily struggle that exists for people to simply have a roof over their heads. We talk about it with our neighbors and family. We're blown away by the fact that the average 1-bedroom apartment in the region now rents for over $1,100 a month. We know friends and relatives who are 1 trip to the emergency room or 1 lost paycheck away from losing their housing. The burden of this crisis is falling hardest on our lowest income earners. This includes families, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. The gap between money coming in and what it costs to make rent feels insurmountable. We know that kids are more likely to succeed in school and in life when they have a stable place to live. Without more affordable housing for families, we will leave many of today's generation of kids behind, and our graduation rates will only continue to suffer. So the total bond is a really critical piece of the puzzle. The total bond is $652.8 million over 20 years. The bond will cost an estimated 24 cents per thousand of assessed value, which will cost the average homeowner only $5 a month, or $60 a year. By proposing a region-wide bond rather than a local bond, more communities will contribute to and benefit from it, lowering the cost to the average homeowner to a little more than a coffee drink a month. We want these dollars to go as far as possible, so we're also asking Oregonians to vote yes to amend the state's constitution to make these housing bonds more effective. The amendment, Measure 102, and a yes vote on 102 will allow local communities to approve bond funds that can be used in public-private partnerships with nonprofit businesses, housing providers, communities across Oregon who are struggling to provide enough housing units at a rate residents can afford. So the Oregon legislature voted almost unanimously to refer this measure to the ballot. It has a lot of bipartisan support, and it's a small change that will make a big impact. This bond and bonds that communities throughout Oregon might approve in the future will be able to put different pieces of funding with these bond dollars to stretch them even further. For example, right now, the bond we're asking voters to approve would house up to 7,500 people. If we also pass this statewide amendment, Measure 102, we can house up to 12,000 people. So it's never been easy to build affordable housing. If it was, we wouldn't be sitting here asking you to approve these 2 measures. So I really hope you'll endorse, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks.
Good evening, board members, Chairperson Moore, and Mr. Superintendent. My name is Sahan McKelvey. I am an executive at a local nonprofit, also a member of the Welcome Home Coalition Steering Committee, and I'm here before you today on behalf of the Affordable Housing Campaign to seek endorsement for the two measures that Lily spoke about, the Affordable Housing Bond and Constitutional Amendment Measure 102. And wanted to share a little bit from the thought process of how this is directly impacting our PPS students that you are here representing right now. There are over 1,500 PPS students that are currently homeless. That is the equivalent of a large high school with every single student leaves every day, walks away from school, where whether they had a good experience, a bad experience, learned effectively, enjoyed their teachers or not, they're leaving school and walking into a reality that does not include a home. They're walking into a very dark reality that is very counterproductive to their ability to effectively succeed and grow in school. This is what we all want to be able to see for our students. And I don't have to talk to any of you or tell any of you the amount of time and resources that is invested by yourselves, our school administrations, our teachers, into helping these 1,500 students to be able to cope with that traumatic experience of leaving school every day to walk into a reality that does not include a place to go. And being able to effectively take a step, it's not the full step, but it's a significant step towards where we will want to be, and having these students be able to be housed is something that I would hope and definitely advocate for the school board to be able to endorse. I think that, one, we would all be in agreement that it is a significant amount of resource to address helping these kids to cope with this reality after the fact. Two, I think we would all be in agreement that in addressing this type of matter, a level of prevention is better and more effective than a level of intervention after the fact. So being able to provide some level of prevention by giving the most vulnerable of our populations, which would include a lot of these 1,500 students, an adequate place to live, will be a significant step for our school district. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Carrie Lyons.
Is it on? Yeah. Good evening, Chair Moore, school board members, and superintendent. My name is Carrie Lyons, and I'm the director of the Welcome Home Coalition. If you're new to the coalition, we passed the Portland Housing Bond in 2016, which provided $258 million to build approximately or acquire 1,300 affordable homes in the city of Portland. Our coalition is comprised of 65 organizations, from affordable housing developers to homeless service providers to culturally specific organizations. And we have one goal, which is to work with local jurisdictions to bring in new revenue to fill our significant affordable housing gap, which is about 47,500 units for a family of four that makes $24,000 or less. I'm here tonight to express my support for this measure, specifically because Oregon has the third highest rate of unsheltered homeless people in the country, and the second highest rate of unsheltered people in households with children. We're known for our livability and our green spaces, but we have the second highest rate of unsheltered people in households with children. I don't know about you, but as an Oregonian, that's not really a statistic that I want to, be able to own as a local. We hear stories every day of families doubling up in rooms, single mothers trying to find affordable homes so their children won't have to change schools, and children who are living in cars and still going home. I recently visited a shelter in Tigard, which I know is not Portland, but it's a shelter that has developed an after-school program for kids. And it seemed like a really awesome thing at the time that kids can live in a shelter and get the after-school care that they need when they come home from school. But it's a sad state when we've decided to provide after-school care in a shelter because we can't provide those children homes. The link between housing stability and educational health outcomes are very well evidenced. I have a degree in a master's of public health, and this is part of the research I did in my 12 years at Multnomah County Health Department. Without stable housing, children receive lower test scores, they have a harder time socially and emotionally, and are at higher risk for adverse health outcomes, and this is even stronger for communities of color. The Home Forward wait list right now has about 6,900 people. 13% of those are African Americans, and a portion of those are households with families. As a community, we must build the housing stock we need and do it in a way that makes rents affordable to different family types. I recently had the opportunity to visit a property at 105th and Burnside. It is a Portland housing bond project. It's 51 units, and each bedroom has its own bathroom. Imagine being a child living on the street or in a shelter in the homeless family system of care. We will have 51 of those units being housed this September by families currently in the homeless family system of care. So I'm here to tell you that you, by passing this bond, could bring almost $300 million more to the Multnomah County area based on how the money is divided. And you could see those unsheltered children in that statistic that we hold true to be the second highest state with that status by housing those children within the next several years. So I'm here to urge you to endorse Measure 26199 and Measure 102 so we can open up opportunities outside of Portland to ensure that all people have a safe, healthy, and affordable home. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to ask Director Anthony to start the discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that testimony. 1,500 children homeless in our district is absolutely unacceptable. And the sad fact of the matter is that we know perfectly well that this is impacting many, many more children, probably in the tens of thousands, because of instability. They may not technically be homeless, but they're bouncing from housing to housing to housing, and they're changing schools when they do. Bethany Barnes recently wrote a 3-part series in the Oregonian, Reading, Writing, Evicted, and it made public the consequences of school churn on our children. Ms. Barnes is in the back, sitting on the floor. We are very grateful, Bethany. What we've been seeing for years inside Portland Public is that many of our children, particularly our highest needs children, children of color, special needs children, children with high levels of trauma and high ACEs scores, children who recently immigrated to the United States and speak little or no English, are currently bounced from one housing situation to another, moving not within a neighborhood or even within a school district, but from one end of the metro area to another. Family in the Wilson cluster in southwest Portland is bounced to David Douglas or Gresham Barlow, and then to Tiger Tualatin, then to the Madison cluster, then to the Roosevelt cluster, and the cycle simply never ends for them. Recent local research indicates that these children lose an entire year's worth of learning with just one such move. One recent analysis the district attempted showed approximately a third of Madison High School students have attended at least 8 schools before they came to Madison, and that at least a quarter of the students at Roosevelt High School had attended 12 or more before they ever got to Roosevelt. We need a robustly resourced housing strategy to keep children in their schools. We cannot afford any disposable children. Resolution number 5723, in support of Measure 26-199, the Regional Affordable Housing Bond. Measure 26199 is a regional bond measure to fund affordable housing for low-income families, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. It will help build new affordable homes and renovate existing homes for over 7,500 people in the region in need of safe, affordable housing, or up to 12,000 people if Ballot Measure 102, the statewide constitutional amendment, passes as well. Lack of stable, affordable housing has been identified as destructive to student success, corrosive to healthy, sustainable school cultures, and a leading barrier to raising the high school graduation rate. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved by Director Brim-Edwards, seconded by Director Bailey. Board discussion.
A question. You mentioned ACEs scores. Could you explain what that refers to?
ACEs scores are adverse childhood experiences. The experience of, for instance, growing up in a home with alcoholism, mental health issues, and there are 9 standard adverse experiences. A leading one is losing a home.
Thanks. Just my war against acronyms continues. A couple of things. I'm going to enthusiastically support this measure and the other housing measure as well. One of the economic statistics I track in my real job is the housing costs as a percent of income. There's a federal standard that says if more than 30% of your household income is going to housing costs, you're in distress. You have too much going to housing, not enough left to others. I don't know the statistic for Portland, but just across the river in Clark County, it's the nature of roughly 45% of renters fall into that category, and almost a quarter are in the 50% or more of their income going to housing. Extreme distress. And that's pretty much how it is throughout the entire state of Washington, and I'd be surprised if Oregon is any different from that, maybe worse in some areas. Particularly rural areas as well really struggle with this. The solution for homelessness is not more shelters, it's more housing. This is a national issue, and it's really brought upon by, in part, by one, the stagnation of wages over the last 30 or 40 years in this country, but also by the federal government spending less and less investment in low-income housing, leaving states and cities to make up the difference, and that's where we are tonight. And a final note, something that Director Anthony brought up a couple of weeks ago, the Secretary of State's audit of graduation rates named homelessness or housing instability as one of the key factors in Oregon's low graduation rate.
So I'm going to support this measure. I think Director Anthony and Director Bailey have both articulated reasons to support it. I think I'm going to have sort of one cautionary note, and it's not about the how the funds will be used, but about how the funds are raised. So for Portlanders, we'll now have, we already have a Portland housing bond that's paid for by property tax. That's a relatively new property tax. And then this will be Metro layering another property tax on top of that. So if you're in Portland, you have two housing bonds you're paying for in addition to all the other property taxes that cover essential public services, including two very important ones for Portland Public Schools. I'm concerned that the property tax rate for Portlanders is getting to a level that it's not that people don't support the public services, but it's just hard to cover it. To Director Bailey's point about wages increases, our property taxes are, if not the highest, one of the highest in the state. And I'm concerned that the secondary impact of using this particular tax for housing is that it actually ultimately makes housing potentially more expensive because it usually gets passed along. So it's an issue I raised today in a conversation with the Metro president, the incoming Metro president, as we go forward to be thinking about that sort of overall tax burden. And I guess this is sort of the ongoing call for us to have coordination with our regional partners around how we assess taxes and funding for essential public services in the region. So, but I'm going to be supportive.
I think Director Edwards brings up an important point, and I think it highlights the need to encourage our employers to give their employees living wages. We've had wage stagnation for 40 years. There's a reason why we have the highest rates of wealth inequality in the United States since the Gilded Age in the 19th century. I think it also points out the need for genuine tax reform, which we'll be talking about in a moment, and that local property taxes should not have to bear the entire burden of essential services that ought to be provided by the government and supported by residents of this state, and including the business community. That's my editorial comment. And I I wholeheartedly support both of these bond measures, both of these measures. I spent a lot of time talking about social determinants of education. Housing is one of them. Housing is probably the most important of all of them. If you don't have stable housing, you cannot maintain your health, you cannot maintain relationships, students cannot learn. Kids living in tents cannot learn. Doesn't matter how much money you throw at the problem. If they don't have housing, they can't learn. So, I heartily endorse this.
And as a final comment, I would like to mention that the Portland Public School Board is not just sitting on its hands as we're looking at this housing bond and this future affordable housing. We do have a considerable list of asks, and we are trotting around. If you're responsible for putting up some of this affordable housing, if we haven't visited you yet, we will be. So, shall we ask for a vote? Oh, yes.
Before we vote, I have two items. So first, let's see. I need to just make a statement regarding my employer. So while there is, after consultation with the general counsel, while there's no potential or actual conflict of interest under ORS Chapter 244, I'm providing notice that the entity that employs me is participating in the campaign efforts of each of these measures. So that's one thing. So I'd like that Ms. Hewson to be recorded for each of the measures we're going to vote on, with the exception of Resolution 5719, because my employer is not taking a position on that. And then the other one is just, I'm going to want to have a vote explanation included for all of the resolutions that, and I appreciate Director Moore working on them, but we received the language last night, and there wasn't time to do sort of our normal weighing in and wordsmithing. And so while I'm going to support each of the measures, I just say that right now, and I'll vote for them. I'm not actually endorsing the actual language and the recitals and the resolution because I didn't have time to review or make suggestions. So, no, because it prolong it, and I think the main point is that we're, I think, going to have a unanimous support.
And Director Anthony, I want to clarify, there were two that you introduced. We have a motion for one of them, and then we need to have a motion. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So, all in favor of Resolution 5723, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Student representative?
Yes, aye.
Thank you. So by a vote of 5-0, with student representative voting yes, passed that. And then probably a little quicker here, resolution number 5719 in support of Measure 102, statewide constitutional amendment. Measure 102 is a statewide constitutional amendment to lift the current ban on the ability of local governments to work with nonprofits and local businesses to build affordable housing with bonds. It will help leverage future dollars to build new affordable homes and renovate existing homes. If Measure 26199 passes, it will help provide safe, affordable housing for up to 12,000 people. Lack of stable, affordable housing has been identified as destructive to student success, corrosive to healthy, sustainable school cultures, and a leading barrier to raising the high school graduation rate. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Chair Moore and seconded by Director Bram-Edwards. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Student representative.
Aye.
So again, by a vote of 5-0, It passes with the student representative voting aye. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the ballot measures related to the taxation system. Director Bailey?
Thank you. So there are two ballot measures that have to do with tax revenue in the state. And since that bears directly on our finances, they're relevant to our district. The two measures are both restrictions, would call for restrictions on revenue. That's one thing they have in common. The other thing they have in common is that they're both constitutional amendments. And while that's not strictly a concern for the school board, as citizens, if you've ever taken a wander through our state constitution, you'll see a lot of things in there that really don't belong there. They're not first principles that really should guide the state. They have, they should be laws not in the Constitution. And that, I believe, applies to both these measures. So one is ballot measure 103. It bans any taxes on groceries. It bans increasing any taxes on groceries. So let me just read it real quick. It's a constitutional amendment that, if approved, would prevent the enactment or increase of any state or local tax, fee, or assessment on the sale of groceries, which would include any raw or processed food or beverages intended for human consumption, excluding alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. Now, while that sounds fairly straightforward, the state Attorney General's office has said that this probably will affect indirect taxation, such as a tax on business profits of any grocery business or possibly any business that supplies groceries as well. So it's much more than, most states with sales taxes actually exclude groceries from that sales tax. But it's much more than that, what you see at the store in terms of a sales tax. It's all those indirect taxes as well. A couple of direct considerations. Some areas have had a tax on sugary beverages because they're bad for you, and they're especially bad for kids. And all too often, you see teenagers with a big gulp thing. That's bad for you, short-term and long-term. We should, I believe, leave open the consideration that we might want to consider a tax on that. That's one of the role of taxes, tax bad things. People use less of them. A second thing is, until we figure out our revenue situation, until we adequately fund human services, education, housing, healthcare, let's not put any restrictions on how we raise revenue. So the resolution reads, the Board of Education for Portland Public Schools opposes Measure 103 because constitutional amendments should be limited to basic principles. The measure would place limits on taxation that go far beyond a direct sales tax on groceries, and revenue options should not be taken off the table until Oregon finds a way to adequately fund education, human services, and health care. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion by board members?
So I just want to put a fine point on the constitutional issue. While it sounds like a small thing, I think for voters to remember that when we passed ballot measure 47, which was a property tax limitation, there were drafting mistakes, which often happens when you have just one party drafting not party like a partisan party, but just one party drafting language. That when it passed, it took a year of legislative work to fix the errors in it, and then a re-referral to the voters so the voters could pass the fixes. And so I think just a cautionary note to voters that anytime we put something in the Constitution, it's much easier to put it in than it is to fix things once the errors are in. And, drafting errors happen. It's just, even with the best lawyers, it happens.
Any other discussion? So all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Abstentions? And student representative votes?
Yes.
So the resolution passes 5-0 with the student representative voting yes. I'll have to get your last.
We might want to stipulate that the resolution number is 5720.
Thank you. That was resolution 5720. So now let's move on to resolution 5721, which has to do with measure 104, which here we get into the weeds a little bit. There's currently, again, in the Constitution, a law that voters passed a number of years ago that requires a supermajority of 3/5 vote in both the House of Representatives and the Senate to raise taxes. That was initially understood to mean that raising taxes would include ending a tax credit or a tax exemption. But that was refined in a court case a number of years ago. So this is an attempt to bring that back. And so what it would include is any bill to reduce tax breaks, such as exemptions and credits, would be part of that, or any increase in fees as well. So a couple of things. If you know anything about the legislature around tax credits and exemptions and those kinds of things, they're highly political, and they usually favor a small group at the expense of a larger group. And that small group gets a fairly large benefit, and the rest of us get a fairly small, what's the opposite of, we end up paying more while a small amount, while they end up paying a lot less. So they have a big incentive for a small number of people to impact that legislation and keep that tax credit going, while the opposition to that is relatively small, because I'm only nicked a little bit, not a lot. And so those kind of things tend to have a life of their own and stay on forever. This law would make repealing things like that would require 3/5 of the legislature to agree. And it's pretty hard to get the 3/5 of the legislature to agree on anything these days. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I'm an economist. What do economists love to talk about? Among other things, inflation. We need to increase fees to keep up with inflation, just to keep up with things. Imagine if, for example, TriMet couldn't increase bus fare to keep up with inflation. We'd still be paying 25 cents for a bus ride, except there wouldn't be any buses because we couldn't afford it. That's just basic good governance. And so that's just another reason why I oppose this measure. So let me read the resolution. The Board of Education of Portland Public Schools opposes Measure 104 because it restricts state government's ability to address persistent revenue shortfalls and to follow basic good governance by allowing a minority of legislators to block common sense increases in fees and tax credits and exemptions that lower revenue and favor special interests. Any discussion? Or we need a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved by Director Anthony and seconded by Director Brim Edwards. Discussion?
This is, I think, sort of the definition of in the weeds, and my guess is that this is gonna go below the radar of most people, and in my opening remarks for this section, I talked about the criteria that we are using to determine whether we're going to take a position on a political issue or not. One of the criteria is whether us weighing in would have any impact, any actual impact on either the debate or the outcome. And I think this is like the quintessential example of an issue that the school board saying something might have an actual impact. This is really arcane. Anybody just reading the ballot title, the ballot measure title, is probably going to be completely confused, and I don't think most people will be able to. It's not immediately obvious that this is going to have an impact on education, but it will. Taxes, the devil is in the details. In taxes, probably more than anything else. If we increase the number of items that are going to require a supermajority of the legislature, that is going to have a huge impact on revenue going forward. So I'm in favor of us actively opposing this measure, precisely because most people are not going to know that they should oppose it. This has an impact on education. It has an impact on pretty much everything. Because when push comes to shove, what matters is money. And this is about money. So I endorse our opposition.
I would like to offer an amendment, because I think a word or two got left out that affect how the resolution scans. And that's why I ask my students to read what they write out loud, because that's when you discover.
Good thing we're not putting this into the Constitution.
So I'm going to propose that the resolution reads, the Board of Education of Portland Public Schools opposes Measure 104 because it restricts state government's ability to address persistent revenue shortfalls and to follow basic good governance by allowing a minority of legislators to block common sense increases in fees and, the new language, elimination of tax credits and exemptions that lower revenue and favor special interests. And I think that was the original intent. Does that make sense? It was that last clause was just sort of hanging out there.
Ms. Large, do we need to make that amendment by motion?
Motion to adopt that amendment.
So I'm making that motion.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion? Or any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Student representative, aye. Motion carries 5-0 with student representative voting yes. Now, any further discussion of the main resolution?
Amended resolution. Amended resolution.
Amended resolution, thank you. Still working on my Robert's Rules of Orders. In that case, let's go for a vote. All those in favor of Resolution 5721?
As amended.
As amended. I love going to school. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Student representative?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0 with the student representative voting yes.
Okay, next item, Director Brim-Edwards.
Okay, next item is Resolution 5722, and this is a resolution in opposition to Ballot Measure 105, which is a measure to repeal the law limiting use of state and local law enforcement resources to enforce federal immigration laws. So the interesting thing about this is it's actually seeking to strike language that's been in current state law for about 30 years. It's Oregon Revised Statute 181A 820. When this law was put into place, it really was an anti-racial profiling measure. It was pre-sanctuary state, but really an attempt to limit racial profiling in the state. It passed with, at the time, with broad bipartisan support, and has been, I think, a useful tool and guide for law enforcement and local communities for the last 30 years. But here in Oregon, you can collect signatures and put things on the ballot, and so we have a group that's seeking to repeal it. So the measure would basically, for 30 years, police have been prohibited from stopping, detaining, or interrogating anyone on the basis of appearance. This measure would eliminate those protections, opening the door to racial profiling and jeopardizing the civil liberties of Oregonians, and really negatively impacting our public safety. And I had an opportunity the other day to talk to Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese, who's opposing this measure, and he spoke quite eloquently about the need, the importance of the ability of all of our communities to be able to trust the police, to be able to call and report crimes, and that if this is repealed, there'll be less trust among some communities in being able to reach out to police to report crime. So this element of trust is very important. In addition, that in an environment of chronic underfunding for essential services, local police are already stretched thin. So what this measure would do is add a new requirement on our local law enforcement officers. So not only sort of reallocating funding, but also diverting officers' time and attention from other very important public safety issues. So why is this relevant to Portland Public Schools? We serve a highly diverse population, many of whom come from immigrant families, and all of whom have the right to access educational opportunities safely and without fear of harassment to themselves or their families. In addition, this measure contravenes Portland Public Schools' commitment to protecting and respecting students and families of all races, ethnicities, religions, citizenship, immigration status, and national origin, as expressed in our racial educational equity policy and affirmed by Resolution 5509, supporting the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival Program. So this resolution encourages, would have the school board taking a position in opposition to ballot measure 105. Do I have a motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Director Bailey, seconded by Director Anthony. Any discussion?
This is appalling that it's on the ballot. That we should have to vote on basic civil rights.
I'm just going to stand with that and say that I think the decision we're making is a good one. Yeah, for all of our students and families.
And I completely agree. And I think that Director Bram-Edwards, Director Bailey, both said it very, very well. This is a fundamental civil right, and it's a fundamental public safety issue. I would put it this way. Speaking as a Sicilian American, you do not want to live in a country where any group is afraid to access the courts, the law, basic civil governance. It's an invitation to organized crime. It's an indication that the civil order is going to fall apart. I'm very happy to oppose this.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll just close by saying there's a broad coalition in opposition. It's not the Oregon way. It's not just, it's not fair, and it's not Oregon. So with that, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Of resolution.
resolution 5722?
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? Student representative?
Yes.
The motion passes on a 5-0 vote with the student representative voting yes.
I just want to appreciate the board for not being silent on this particular measure, especially thank you for not being silent on this one.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay, so the next item is the business agenda. The board will now consider the remainder of its business agenda, having already voted on Resolution 5717. Ms. Hewson, are there any changes to the business agenda?
No.
Okay.
So I'm just going to state that in the interest of taking a deeper dive on the contracts this week, I reviewed all the direct negotiation contracts, and there were 5 of them, 3 school ones, 2 central office ones, and reviewed the reports and deliverables that were called out in the contracts. And there's one contract that I'm going to ask if we can defer for 2 weeks. Last year's contract requires a midterm report and a final report. We just got the final report, and in addition, there's contract language that requires a payment in August and September, in which that's before the term of the contract starting, and it's not. I haven't been able to discern whether or not we've actually paid them. So I'd request that we just hold it over till 2 weeks to be able to get the required deliverables and get the answer to the question on the actual language of the contract.
Can I just clarify on any possible summer invoices that may be received? It would not be permitted under our own rules and procedures. Our accounts payable team is trained to not pay those invoices before an actual contract has been executed between both parties. So,
right, so
your other question is related to the midterm report.
Yeah, so I think it'd be good to get just it cleaned up so that we have the issue resolved, and the staff person who's on point for this is not here this evening.
My only question, and I don't know, Danny Ledesma is in the back of the house here, but if there's any essential services that we might not want to disrupt to any of our school communities if there were a further delay for a couple of weeks, or someone.
For a couple of weeks that there would be students that would not have their mentoring start at the beginning of the year, so it would delay some mentoring of students.
Which contract?
It's the IM Academy. So I guess
I'm actually here if anybody wants to ask me any questions about it. I tried to sign up, but they say it was already full since last week.
So have you already, Madam Chair, may I ask the gentleman a question?
My name is Herman Green. Last name Grene.
So you can maybe answer the question.
I can answer whatever question you got.
So we still have the midterm report, which one of the things the board had talked about is just in terms of contract administration is always getting our deliverables from the previous year. But I did have a question. Have you already submitted, this is the question I didn't get answered from the contract people. Have you already submitted invoices for this fiscal year? Or supplied services?
You're asking me if I submitted an invoice for the 2018-2019 school year. Is
For
that
the
correct?
start of the school year?
Yes. No, I have not. Okay. So, and all of the reports, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm actually the one that sends out the reports, have been sent out to Dunya and Ezel as well as to all of the principals, because we also have to send out a report to each principal within at Roosevelt, Franklin, and Grant. We're required to send out progress reports, a midterm report, and then 4 as we're going along reports. And to the best of my knowledge, and I do have my iPad back there so that I can go back and pull up the date that it was sent out if we needed to. All those reports were sent out and received.
Yes, so the contract requires a midterm report and a final report, and
It requires the 2 major reports
Right,
are
and so-
the midterm report.
Right, and we didn't get the
and
midterm
end of year
report.
report. So what I'm saying is that midterm report was submitted to the Office of Equity and Inclusion. That's Ms. Dunya's office. It was sent to Ezell Watson as well as Dunya Minio. I'm sure to the best of my knowledge, it was sent. Again, that's why I'm saying, if you like, I can open up my iPad and get the exact date on which that report was sent out and to whom it was sent to.
If I may, my understanding is that Dunya reported verbally to me that she had received all the reports. I believe she sent you the year-end report because she wanted you to see the cumulative information.
So just as a matter of practice, if we're going to vote on an annual contract, I mean, part of the issue is we got this on Friday before a 3-day weekend, and so I asked for, and again, I didn't just ask for one contract. I for all 5 of the direct negotiation contracts, asked for any deliverables that were included. And when I asked for that report, and I've gone back and forth by email, and I don't have the report. So this is part of contract administration. I mean, I guess this is just sort of a point for the board that I think as a best practice, we need to make sure that if we're renewing an annual contract that we have available to us whatever's due. I brought this up last week with the Playworks contract, that we have that, so before we just roll over into another year, that we've done our due diligence if we want to do that.
Did you need me to tell you what day that report was sent out on? Would that help? Would that be helpful at all? Or is the concern that you
Well, frankly, I
asked
haven't
for
had a
it and
chance-
they didn't send it to you?
Well, I didn't get it. I mean, ideally, I had a chance to review the year-end report and all the other reports that were supplied.
So that office didn't deliver the report to you, is what we're saying. It wasn't that we didn't deliver it to the school district. I just want to be clear what
Correct.
we're asking about. Okay.
Correct. So I asked on Friday afternoon, right after I got the business agenda, for a copy of any mid or quarterly or mid reports and the final reports for any of the contracts that required them, which there were 3 of them, 3 contracts like that.
So you asked earlier what would be delayed by pushing this out 2 weeks. What are we going to lose? That was a question that you asked. No one in this room that I'm aware of was able to answer that question. So I'd like to take a moment and answer it for you if you'd still like to know what's going to be delayed.
Can you hold on, just Madam Chair, if you don't mind?
I can.
I'm wondering, Ms. Large, if there's a way that we could allow them to carry on the work and have a final vote after we get the report?
Unfortunately, no.
No? Okay. Well, I'm not going to stand in the way of 2 weeks of mentoring by students, but I certainly, I guess, in the future, expect us to get our business agenda earlier and all our reports. I think this is an issue that came up previously with the audit committee, that we get and this isn't particular to you, so I don't take it personally, but just any of the contracts, so that when we're voting on them, that we have the ability to look and see what sort of performance was paid. So I'll let this go, but I would hope that we're not put in this position again.
Thank you for your reports, received both mid-year and end of year. We did get a request from Director Brim Edwards to also see the mid-year at the end of the day, Friday. So we'll make sure and forward that to you. We want to make sure our board has these in advance. We're evolving our practices. It hasn't necessarily been standard operating procedure that every business agenda contract. So we're trying to do our due diligence here. So thanks for your patience, but we'll make sure and forward the mid-year report to the whole board as well.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? Okay, so are you okay with leaving it in the business agenda?
Yeah, because I'm not going to stand in the way of 2 weeks of mentoring. I just think we need to button down our practices so that we can make good decisions and be fully informed. So it's a go forward, but go ahead. I'll vote for the business agenda.
Okay.
If there's no way to hold it over without having some sort of penalty to students.
Okay. So, do we have a motion on the business agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Director Anthony, seconded by Director Bailey. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Student representative?
Aye.
The business agenda passes on a vote of 5-0 with the student representative voting yes.
So, Madam Chair, I'll have a written explanation to put in the record as well.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other reports, conference reports, or other business that board members want to? Do you have a?
Well, I'd just like to address that today, right before the board meeting, we had our first meeting with the District Student Council of the year. And I thought that went really well today. So we had 6 of the high schools represented today for people coming to the district. And we are going to begin planning for our winter PPS summit, which is going to take place hopefully in early December. And we're really looking forward to that. So I'm excited for the new year.
Sounds great.
I'm sorry, just leftover agenda item. So there does need to be, and it sounds like there can be a handwritten change, but the actual language of even though we approved it, it needs to be changed because it currently authorizes a payment before the contract starts, which Emily said she could fix, but it just as a.
Okay, do we need to do anything for that?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, any other business?
So, Madam Chair, one other thing. So I would like to ask that the full board have an opportunity sometime in the next month to have a full board conversation about the visioning process so that we can walk through the model that we're going to use, what role the board has, what role the community has before we sort of get going too far. We had a work session last week which was useful, although it was at midnight or 11 to midnight. And I think
It's only 11:45.
okay, I stand corrected. But I think it's really going to be important that the community, the broader community, understands the process. I think based on the model that's been laid out, I think there needs to be a board discussion on board roles within the process, and I would hope that happens before too much more work gets underway.
Okay, logged and noted. Okay, any other business? The board will follow this meeting with an executive session. The next regular meeting of the board will be held on September 25th, and this meeting is adjourned.